Hello, welcome to The Musician's Journey. I'm George Martin. I'm the musician of the channel. This is part of my journey. So I'm in the middle of recording a country song based on a video by a chap called Stevie T, a very well-known YouTube guitarist. And he gives a formula, if you like, a bit tongue-in-cheek for how to create a country song. So I'm following that formula to see if I can make anything of it.
And today I'm going to teach you how to be country music.
If you haven't seen this video, there's a link in the description, but don't go off yet because I want you to watch this video. So far I've recorded the drums, acoustic guitars, electric rhythm guitars, electric solo guitar, and the bass guitar. And so the next stage of the evolution of the song is to actually do the vocals. But before I do that, I need to kind of tidy up what I've got so far, because if I just play everything through as I've got it, it's just going to be a big mush of sound. What I'm going to be doing today is compiling each of those audio tracks into the best possible take that I can get, maybe doing a little bit of tweaking of the timing, making sure it's on the beats. So if you have a look at what I've got so far. Okay, so I've recorded the drums. Just have a quick listen to what they sound like on their own. I say I recorded them. I used a software plugin called EasyDrummer. More about that in the video when I actually, I think it's the first in this playlist actually. After I did the drums, I did the bass. So let's bring the bass in. This is all pre any mixing or arranging, so it's eventually going to sound very mushy and messy. I'll have guitars playing across the top of each other and clashing each other out because I haven't arranged them as to what's going to be in and what's out yet. But this is with the bass. Then I recorded some Breedlove guitars, left and right. Obviously they're not panned left and right at the moment, but they will be. That's the plan later on. Following that, I did some more acoustics. I did the Tanglewood again with two microphones, and I did several passes with the Tanglewood. I did just a straight rhythm pass. I did just strums on the beats. I did a muted thing all the way through, and then I did an arpeggio. So this is probably going to sound incredibly mushy now. There's no definition there. It's all the subtle nuances of arpeggios and strummed chords are just lost in the mush. So the next thing to look at is, or to listen to, should we say, is I brought in some Strat rhythm and Strat fill. This is when it's going to get really messy. Loud. Then I had some Telecaster fills, and the solo was played on the Telecaster, and we're in the solo section, so this is going to blast your ears, so just be careful. Probably turn your volume down a bit. Yeah, so you can see that I've recorded all those bits so far, and moving on to the next bit. Part of this video is about actually doing a static mix. Right, so you can see what I've got so far. So before I actually record the vocals, I need to, as I say, I need to do this compiling. What I'll be doing is I'll be checking each audio track, making sure it's sitting in the pocket, as it were. It's the right note. If I need to do any slight tuning amendments, I'll do that. For the acoustic guitars, I make sure that those guitars are in phase, because I've recorded the acoustics with two microphones. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, there's a link in the description to the video that I did about recording acoustic guitars. And then once I've done all of that, and there's quite a lot of work to do that in itself, once I've done all of that, I'll do what's called a dry mix or a static mix. And this is a mix just using the volume faders and the pan. So there'll be no EQ, no effects, nothing like that. It's just to get a rough balance so that can, when I listen to it when I'm recording the vocals, it's going to sound reasonable. And once I've done that and recorded the vocals, I have to do the dry/static mix all over again. So now it's time to do it. Okay, so the first thing I've got to do is sort out the phase, or check the phase of the acoustic guitars that I recorded. If you remember, they were recorded with 2 microphones, and that can cause phasing issues. So if we look at the screen here, we're looking quite closely in at the waveforms of a recording of the Breed Love with the Samsung microphone and also the SM57, both recorded at the same time, and the sound hitting those microphones at slightly different times. So the way I'm going to check the phase is I've got this little tool inside Studio One called Mix Tool, which I'll put on one of the tracks. So it's only on this first track here, showing there. It's not on this second one. And what I can do is, before I do anything with that mix tool, I'll just play it back and we'll see how it sounds. Okay, doesn't sound too bad. The objective, obviously, in getting them in phase is to sort out that phase cancellation, which makes it sound thin and weedy. So what the mix tool does is, if I turn it on, and because it's on this one channel, if I invert the phase of the channel that it's on, then I'm basically forcing them to be out of phase. So it should sound thinner and weedier than it did a minute ago. Just listen to that. And you can hear quite a clear difference there. So with the mix tool on and the phase inverted, the thinner I can get it to sound, the more in phase it will be when I turn the inversion off. So we can actually see, just by looking at this, these 2 waveforms, you can see here that they're not quite in sync. That is the beginning of a peak, and it doesn't line up there. So I would say that if I shift this one over so that lines up like that, and we just have a look in a couple of other places. I mean, it's not going to match on every single peak and trough, but I get it as close as I can. Okay, so I'm happy with that. I think it's quite clearly there was a slight out of phase there, so I've sorted that first one out. I'll do the other acoustic tracks. I'm not going to show you it all. It's just exactly the same process for each of them, so I'll get those sorted out. Okay, that's the first acoustic guitar track comped. That's one acoustic track with one microphone. I've got to do the next microphone. Then I've got to do the right hand side, 2 microphones. Then I've got to do all the electrics, rhythms and fills and solos. So I'm not going to record all of that and show it all on here. Suffice to say, it will get done in time for the vocal video that I'll be recording in whenever. Right, so that's all of the tracks comped. Any tweaking I needed to do, moving them a little bit on the timeline to line up with the beat. That's all done for all of the tracks. And now it's time to do that, as I mentioned earlier, on that dry mix, that static mix, for messing around, using the faders to just give me the right rough volume mix, and the pan to get them roughly where I want them in the stereo picture. if we have a quick look at the screen, we can see that I've got them in groups. So I'm not using strings on this, it's just a template that I use in Studio One. So I've got all my electric guitar tracks there. So I've got the strats, rhythms, strat fills, Telecaster fills, solo, and I've got the bass there as well. And I've also got all of the acoustic guitars there. Breedlove left and right, Tanglewood left and right, rhythms and fills. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to do a very rough, dry, static mix to get a rough mix for recording vocals over. If you look at all of these guitars, they're all playing at the same time. And I recorded that way on purpose to give me options when it comes down to arranging, so I can cut bits out and I can bring things in and make the song dynamically more interesting. And I haven't done that yet, so all I'm going to have is just a mush if I let everything play. So what I'm going to do now is going to pick a section of the song, probably the chorus, and just loop it because that's got all the instruments in it, and just loop it backwards and forwards and adjust the mix and the panning and so on. So that's the chorus. That'll now loop backwards and forwards because I've got the loop on. Okay, so let's bring up my channel mixer. And at the moment, everything's muted apart from the drums, so we'll have a listen to them. I'm happy with the drums. Easy Drummer does a fairly good mix of it anyway, and I can tweak that later on if I need to. So the next thing we'll do is bring in the bass and just see where that sits in the mix. Okay, so a slight adjustment there just to bring in, just to bring the bass up a little bit. Again, no effects or EQ or anything on this at the moment. The bass is pan dead center. So the next thing we bring in is these acoustic guitars. That one and that one. First thing we'll do is we will pan these hard left, because that's where they need to be, and we'll have a listen to that. Now, for some reason, I don't quite know what's happening here. Obviously, I've got them panned to the left. You can see that there. I cruise across the left. It's coming through my headphones on the right-hand side. I don't know what it's recording onto this video like, but suffice to say, you will hear things panned left and right. Whether they're panned the way that I want them to be panned or not, I don't know. We shall find that out later on. Okay, so I'm happy with that rough mix there. So let's bring in the next two, and these need to be panned to the right. Okay, let's have a listen to them. Okay, and obviously as I bring more instruments in, I'll be balancing all the ones I've already done. So the next ones I'll bring in are these Tanglewood, the two Tanglewood tracks. Okay, roughly happy with that. And then we've got some strums here. It's just a tanglewood strumming on it, so I'm not sure what it's doing in the chorus, but let's find out. See now the bass is getting a little bit lost, so what I'll do is drop all of these down. Okay, I'm fairly comfortable with that. I'm fairly comfortable with that for the moment. So that's the drums, the bass, and all the acoustics in there. Let's try and bring in some electrics now. Not sure where these Telecaster fills come in, so I'll have a quick look at that. Telecaster fills. Yeah, we've got some in the solo, so. Spend hours and hours doing this over and over again. You get ear fatigue. It's taken quite a few days to get to this point, and as I say, you get ear fatigue after a few hours of working with the headphones on, so that you can hear things closely. And not only do you get ear fatigue, you get note deaf. So I might have to change a few things there. Okay, next thing to bring in. Okay, just have a little listen from the beginning. That's a kind of a rough dry mix. It's by no means what it's going to sound like in the end. It's just so that it's not all total mush for the vocals. Okay, a significant amount of work done there in compiling all those tracks and doing that static mix. And that's it for today. Obviously, that took me a long time, but I've condensed it down to this shorter video. If you've enjoyed this one, please like, subscribe, hit the notification button, get notified when the next video comes out, and I shall see you then.